President Ramaphosa's ability to lead a government that hopes to root out corruption is under sustained scrutiny. Ramaphosa has frequently spoken about his idea of a new dawn, but this is apparently facing opposition from within his own party. Some former ministers from Jacob Zuma's cabinet are set to chair various committees in parliament. These are people seen as Zuma allies who could scuttle Ramaphosa's efforts. Brand expert Salimweng says the president needs to put his foot down. He joins us now from our Cape Town studios this morning. Good morning to you, Sali, and thank you for your time. So how and where do you believe Ramaphosa has failed to put his foot down?
Well, good morning, Temekele. Well, I'm sure that President Ramaphosa is trying to put his foot down, but there are elements within his own party, especially in the top six, who are not going to make it easy for him to do that. I think that if you look at the appointment, just a day before he delivered his SONA, the appointment of some really discredited people to head up portfolio committees of parliament, that means they're going to make it really hard for him. They're going to either delay stuff from going through or they're going to stop stuff from going through. They're not going to give him an easy ride. It's really going to be tough for him over the next 5 years if he doesn't find a way to get these people taken out of those positions.
That brings us to this point then, because when Ramaphosa was coming in as ANC president in 2017, there was what was then this term coined Ramaphoria. He was expected to bring about this great overhaul of government and indeed the ANC itself. But looking back now, was it not ignorant, if not simply silly, to expect that a Cyril Ramaphosa who leads within an ANC collective, the NEC, would be able to unilaterally bring about this change?
I think, the excitement about Ramaphosa, first of all, was warranted. It was understandable, given who he is, where he came from, the role that he played in the early years, in the early 1990s, when he led the process to draft our new constitution, and how close he was to Nelson Mandela, all of that. So people have always hoped that if he returned, there would be sanity in the ANC and in South Africa. But of course, we underestimated the level of rot. We underestimated the level of fear that these corrupt people have. That if anyone like Ramaphosa were to try and do the right thing, which I believe he's trying, they would end up in jail. And maybe some of them will end up in jail anyway. It's just a matter of delaying. They're busy kicking the can down the road. But they know that with him doing the right thing, they cannot be safe.
One of the things you say in this piece that you've penned on the issue is that there will always be enough of us that are too lazy, uninterested, or incapable of connecting the dots who will fall for the same lies over and over again. But some could counter that argument saying that in the 2016 and 2019 election, we've seen shifts in South African voting patterns. There's an EFF that's growing. We've got the Freedom Front Plus that's also grown as well. Also, an increasing number of South Africans simply not voting because they feel there aren't enough options. So is it perhaps not unfair to say that South Africans are too lazy to make the necessary political changes?
No. One cannot generalize. I'm saying there are sufficient numbers of South Africans who still fall for the trick, for the lies. I mean, the fact that the ANC is still in power means gives reason to what I'm saying. It doesn't mean that nobody is angry. It doesn't mean that nobody has voted away from the ANC or chose to stay away, to stay at home. It doesn't mean that. What it does mean is that sufficient numbers of South Africans have fallen for the trick. If you look at the dancers at the stadium, if you look at people who dance in excitement when they see Jacob Zuma walk into a stadium, if you see people who went just last week to demonstrate in Durban, calling for the reinstatement of a mayor who is out on bail. I mean, that's nonsense. There are still too many South Africans out there who do not make the connection between an economy that is really, really hurting and the fact that some of the things that get said are chasing away investments. They making people who have money here in South Africa keep their money and not put it into the economy so it can stimulate the economy. So there's a connection between us justifying and defending the indefensible and business saying, wait a minute, in this kind of climate where there's no clarity, how can we throw our money in? In a climate where people were still calling for the the nationalization of the Reserve Bank, and I'm happy that Mr. Ramaphosa clarified that and put his foot down on that particular issue. But in a climate where there are too many policy statements, contradictory statements coming from the same governing party, it's normal that the economy will suffer. And it's normal that the same people who are defending the indefensible will be the ones marching forever for jobs. But they cannot see it, they cannot have their cake and eat it. You can't threaten business, you can't threaten the expropriation of private property without compensation and still expect the economy to run smoothly. It's not going to happen.
But is that not unfair then, Solly, again? Because a lot of the people who fill these stadiums when the ANC is holding rallies will say to you, they are at the stadium because it's an ANC that led the charge for South Africa's fight for liberation. It's an ANC that for some of them has been able to provide free housing in the form of the RDPs. There are these social grants as well, which is a scheme that's worked fairly well. The ANC has also done well as far as the rollout of antiretroviral treatment. So surely some of those people are justified in believing that this is their best political alternative in this country.
Well, yeah, sure. One could put an argument like that. The thing is, we have to connect the dots. We have to look at the bigger picture. A lot of people just look at what sits on their particular plate. Anyone who gets his government grant every month maybe doesn't care whether Jacob Zuma stole almost 500 million rands or 300 million rands to build his Nkandla house. Anyone who gets his government grant or who gets his anti-retrieval and who only looks at that part of things without connecting all the other bigger parts will think everything is fine. Why should we complain? And we mustn't forget that the only other time when South Africa was not run by the ANC, it was a really bad place for black people. We must always remember that. So a lot of people easily fall for the lie that were the ANC to be removed from power, apartheid would return, or things would, the government grants would go away, and the RDP homes will go away, and that sort of thing, which is not true. I think that people need to understand that everything is connected. We are part of a bigger ecosystem. If you're just looking at your portion of the ecosystem, you think it's fine when everything else is crumbling on the side, we all want to end up in trouble. And South Africans need to wake up to that. It's not because your house is painted that every other house is okay for every other house not to stay painted.
Solimweng, there are so many other directions we could take this conversation, but we are sadly out of time. Thank you for speaking to us this morning.